Harshit Kumar. So welcome Harshit to our session. And Harshit is a graduate of National Institute of Fashion Technology, NIFT. He has had a good career in retail before he joined ISB, and he is like you see on his name, he's a graduate from the class of 2020, and currently he has an exciting role with Nykaa, and he has kindly agreed to take out time, share his insights and experience about specifically about the interview at ISB. So welcome Harshit, and thank you for taking out time.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, and I'm happy to introduce myself. I am Prashant Tibrewal. I am an MIT alum, and I am also the founder of ISBmantra. And what is ISBmantra? ISBmantra is a decade-old consulting company with 4 former admissions officers on the team, which means that we super specialize in helping candidates apply to ISB, and we have had good success over the past 10 years. So on that note, I would love to hear, please put it in the chat, how many of you are applying to ISB this year? I see some very, very relevant questions in the chat. So I'm assuming quite a few are applying to ISB. This year, the round 1 is September 4th. And we hope that you're working well on your application and receive the interview invite, because this session is especially going to be useful to you. If you're applying to ISB, and if you are required to take the interview at ISB, if you're invited for the interview at ISB. So once the application deadline is over, so if we're talking of round 1, it's September 4th, in about 10 to 15 days, ISB will start rolling out interview invites. And typically, the school gives you about 5 to 7 days to prepare for the interview or appear for the interview, and 5 to 7 days is not a lot. So whichever round you apply to, after the deadline, they will start rolling out interviews, and the process goes on for almost a month, which means you could be receiving an interview invite anytime during the month, and then you will be told on a Monday that, hey, your interview is on Saturday, please join in, please confirm here, which means that it's super important to know what to prepare, how to prepare, because you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare. Okay, and that is why we are doing this session in advance, so that you are able to pick yourself up, buckle up for the interview up front, and you are able to do the right things well in advance. So in this session, we will be touching upon quite a few things related to the interview. One is we will start with understanding the selection process for the interview. How do people get an invite? What does ISB look for when they are reviewing your applications? Then we will talk about the composition of the interview panel and discuss the ideal interview, or what does the interviewer look for when you are sitting with them, when you are talking to them, having that 30-minute conversation. And then we will touch upon the different type of questions that are asked, and of course, how to answer them, how to prepare for them. And we will close with the real ISB interview, the approach that you should have, and follow it up with any questions that you may have. Good. So to begin with, thousands of applicants apply to ISB, and ISB has to decide to invite some of them, has to decide not to invite some of them. Of course, the test score is looked at, the application is read, but what exactly differentiates someone who receives an interview invite and someone who doesn't? Harshit, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think the reader or ISB as a unit or the admissions team looks for when they're reviewing applications with the purpose of inviting or not inviting for interviews?
Right, Prashant. So I think it's a very coherent process where there are multiple parameters which are looked into by ISB to shortlist a candidate for the interview. Few things which I can think of which are very important. One is the past experience, the kind of work which has been done, what kind of impact has been done. So that is one thing which is important. Another thing which ISB also looks at is the academic potential, which is with respect to the GMAT or GRE score that is there, the kind of GPA a candidate has got in undergraduation. So that is again something which is important. Third thing is letter of recommendation. So that is you're getting a recommendation from somebody who's there in the industry. So that is again something which is valued a lot. So these are the three main parameters which are there. And again, ISB gives a lot of focus on the employability part. So anybody who is entering the batch, what is the employability quotient of that candidate? So that is one. And another thing which is very important is the value addition. So as a candidate, as an alum, I got to learn a lot from my peers, from my friends. So peer-to-peer learning is very important. So any candidate, what value addition is happening in the class and also outside the classroom is equally important. So these are some of the parameters on the basis of which ISB shortlists the candidate. One thing which is very important is when somebody is reviewing the application, there should be a certain level of excitement when you're reading, and that is why the whole application process becomes important. Yeah. So these are some of the critical things. Yeah.
Okay, so Harshit, you touched upon 4 points. One is the quality of past experience, the clarity of career goals, because it's important what they want to do after the MBA, and of course their ability to add value to the class, and the academic potential, which is reflected through the GPA or the GMAT or GRE. But a lot of candidates are, probably end up with a low GMAT or GRE. Some of them don't have a very diverse profile. So how does it work? I mean, does one have to score really well on all 4 parameters, or can one parameter compensate the other if one can show that strength?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's hard for somebody to excel in all the 3 or 4 parameters which are there. And that is where these 4 parameters are there, and not disproportionately high focus is given on one parameter. So let's say somebody is not coming from a very diverse background, you can compensate it with your GMAT or GRE score. That is one. Even if not that, the kind of work which you have done, because ISB only have people with work experience. So the kind of work which you have done, if you're able to show that you have demonstrated leadership skills, you have had a big impact on either the bottom line, top line, or the way you have impacted your industry, the quality of work, the kind of work which you're doing, that can definitely compensate. Another thing, I think there's a lot of reflection which happens. A lot of times what happens, there are certain interesting things which have been done, but as a candidate, maybe we are not giving the right kind of importance to those things. So, I mean, there are certain things which we can control with respect to our undergrad score or the kind of background that we are coming with. Nothing much can be done on those parameters. But yeah, in terms of your application, the kind of essays which you're writing, the work that you're doing, a lot can be done. So I would just suggest that if, let's say, 1 or 2 parameters are not good, people should still stay extremely motivated and try and compensate with other parameters, because ISB will definitely give due respect to all the good things which are there in the profile.
Right, very well said. And like we discussed in our last webinar or last session as well, that it is more of a selection process than an elimination process. So if we give them enough reasons to look at our application, they are happy to give us a chance, give the applicant a chance to at least sit for the interview and express themselves, prove themselves. And that's why you see some of the applicants making it to ISB even with, let's say, a 620 or 630 GMAT, and sometimes a not so high GPA. And sometimes it's also in the interest of diversity, because ISB does realize that, or any business school values diversity, and they realize that peer learning is such an important component of the entire experience. So certainly, depending on a holistic review, you may or may not receive an interview invite. Of course, it's a competitive process. Good. So once someone has received an interview invite, they start preparing, and we will get to how to prepare, what to prepare. But before that, it will be interesting to understand who does these interviews, who conducts these interviews, because there's a lot of speculation. Sometimes people think, oh, they are professors who are doing the interviews. Sometimes it's the admissions officers, the alums. So there's a lot of confusion outside. And students get concerned if it is a professor, then maybe they'll ask subject related questions. So it's important to know who is interviewing out there, who are your interviewers. So Harshit, tell us more about the composition of the interview panel, and how does it impact the interview.
Yeah. This is again something which is very important. So interview panel primarily comprises of ISB alums. So people who have graduated from ISB, because again, they have cleared the whole process. Second, they have stayed in ISB for 1 year. They know how things happen, and post ISB experience also they have. So the composition, it primarily comprises of ISB alums. More often than not, there are 3 alums who are there. If in exceptional cases, there could be 2, but yeah, the interview panel will be of 2 to 3 ISB alums. So that is one. A couple of things which ISB takes care. One, with respect to the composition of the panel, ISB would try that somebody from a similar background is there in the interview panel, so that the conversation can be more holistic and you can have a more in-depth understanding of the work which has happened. So that is one thing which ISB try while the mapping is done for the panel. Another thing which ISB takes care is the panel is also very diversified. The kind of background that people are coming in the panel or the kind of experience that they have, the designation at which they are working, is also very different. And again, for simple reason that one person could be from the same industry, that person would be able to understand the work in a certain manner, but there are people who are from some different industry. Now, how are they perceiving the work? So that is again something which is important. So yeah, I mean, to summarize, there are three ISB alums who are there in the panel, and from very diverse and very different background, while there could be one person from the same industry as the candidate.
Right. So you're trying to say that ISB does try to profile match with the interviewer, I mean, the candidate's profile and the interviewer's profile. And of course, they can only try. Sometimes the candidate profile is so diverse, or sometimes it also depends on the availability of the interviewers. But there are certainly alumni, 2 to 3 alumni, and then typically, some candidates have asked or told us that there were only 2 alumni or 1 alum in the panel. But the way it works is they certainly invite 3 alumni for the interview, and with the reason or with the purpose that if one drops out, there are at least 2, because alumni are doing this voluntarily. And then you may also sometimes notice another person who is not an alum sitting there. Mostly they will not be asking any questions. They will be observing, making notes. But so there could be someone from the admissions team. They are also part of the interview panel very often. And they are there for 2 reasons. One, of course, one is to have a good quality check and standard of the interview across different alumni groups or interview panels. And of course, their opinion is valuable, but they are very less likely to ask any questions. Whereas, yes, if you have an alum from your industry, the direction of the questions can be a bit different than if having an alum or having an interview panel with no one from your industry. And both have their pros and cons, but yeah, that's where we stand in terms of the composition of the interview panel. Now, we certainly want to know, Harshit, once a candidate is in the interview room doing the interview, what does ISB look for, or what does the interview panel look for? What are the few parameters they really want to assess through that 30-minute conversation?
Right. So Prashant, I think one thing which is very important for everyone to understand, that if ISB has invited you for the interview, they already like you. They have gone through the application. It's a rigorous process that happens in the back end, and they already like the candidature. They already like the profile. Now through interview, they just want to validate the kind of things which have been mentioned in the application. So one thing that is something which is very important. It's more like checking the authenticity and validating the kind of work which has been done in the application. Now, with respect to what ISB is looking at, I would broadly divide into 3 parameters, which is with respect to the skill set. So one is the skill set, the current skill set which a candidate is coming up with. Second is what are the skill set which a candidate is looking to acquire at ISB during the 1-year program. And third is how those skills will be utilized once the course gets over. So it's all about skill set. One, what is current; second, that will be acquired; and third, how will be utilized. And it should be a coherent story. The dots should connect. So that is something which is extremely important. And these are the 3 simple parameters on which any candidate is evaluated. There are other things, something like communication, because this is the first time when ISB is interacting face-to-face with someone. So communication is something which is important. It is also extremely important to stay confident. Again, the way you are, the non-verbal, the verbal communication, that is something which is important. And another thing which is important is the leadership potential. So that is something when you interact with someone, when you talk more, you get more sense of how that person has demonstrated the leadership potential in the work and different stages of career. So yeah, this is broadly what the panel is looking at.
Right. So there's a wide spectrum of skills and qualities that ISB is looking at or looking to assess during those 30 minutes, is what you're saying. And then these could be through different questions, which may be related to something you have written in the application or something you've not written and they really want to come up with. But what's also very interesting is that ISB. So there is a team that reads the applications before interview calls are given out, and there is a team that interviews. So it is very important that there is a connect between these two teams. And the way it happens is that when you go to the interview room or when the interviewer gets your application, a copy of your application, they do have some notes on that application already, which means whoever has read your essays, whoever has read your application, they have put in some of your strengths, some of your weaknesses or weaker aspects of your application, and they are probably pre-directed to ask you a specific set or test you on a specific set of skills or qualities or specific things that you may have written in your application. So part of the interview is guided by what the readers have pointed out, and then of course the interviewers go through your application. They take an understanding of what could be questions that will help you bring out your best. And like we discussed already, we're always looking for reasons to select. So there is good reason to look for spikes in your application. How can you, or where is the spike? What is it that you'll bring to the class? And if with all their effort, if you're not able to show that, then probably you don't make it to the school or don't make the cut. Great. So that is about what does the interview panel or what do interviewers look for during the interview. But then end of the day, over the years, and we have helped candidates prepare for the interview for over 10 years now. Harshit, you prepared so much, you talked to alumni so much, or your classmates. So is there a larger category that you would define these questions in, because I'm sure there is no limit to the number of questions that one can list, but can we club them into different buckets and say, okay, these are the kind of questions that are typically asked in an ISB interview?
Right. So, Prashant, as you rightly said, the number of questions can be huge and there's no limit to it. But broadly, what I can think of, the questions can be segmented into 4 buckets. So, one is the profile based, the kind of work which somebody has done, the kind of impact which has been given. So, one is profile based. Second could be related to career goals, because that is again something which is very important. ISB is a 1-year program, so ISB wants a candidate to have that level of clarity that what are the career goals and how would ISB help into that. So that is the second thing. Third thing which I can think of are more general questions, that why do you want to do an MBA or why ISB? Something on the lines of tell something more about yourself. So more behavioral questions and related to the program. And fourth, which is again not very common, but that can be asked, is something related to guesstimates and case studies. Now that is also dependent on what we have mentioned in the career goals essay. There are certain industries where guesstimates and case studies are important. And if that is the goal which somebody has mentioned in the application, so there could be 1 or 2 questions around that. Again, that doesn't take too much of time, but yeah, just to test the approach, which is something which is very important. Prashant, one more thing, I mean, you have prepared, you have helped so many candidates, and as we discussed, I mean, these are different kind of questions. If you can share some insights on how to prepare for each kind of question, I'm sure that would be helpful for the people who are applying this year.
Sure, Harshit. So first, yes, I agree that the 4 categories that you defined. One is your past experience related or profile based. Second is your career goal related. Then why MBA, why ISB kind of questions, and then of course the guesstimates, or let's call other miscellaneous questions related to your extracurriculars, etc. And if we have to look at these in very simple terms, one set of questions is about your past. One set of questions is about your present, which means why MBA, why ISB, what do you need? And then one set of questions is about your future. So there's a good reason to think that they're really looking to connect the dots and try to build that coherence, which one, of course, you are supposed to do through your application, but then they are there to validate that. They are there to test if or assess if you are able to justify all that you've written in the essay. But to answer your question, Harshit, how to prepare for these kind of questions? I mean, I'm happy to take one particular category at a time and then go deeper, because the approach is very different. And for the profile-based questions, these are things that you have done. I mean, these are questions related to your work, related to your achievements in the current role, in the past roles. There could be questions around why you made certain transitions in your career, or why you chose to study something but chose to work in a very different field. So there are a lot of questions where they want to understand if you have been consistent in your career plan or thought process. And it's completely all right if you have not been, because there are a lot of engineers who end up working in the marketing field. There are a lot of people who start with marketing and then shift to a completely different role. So the idea is you don't have to be perfect, but you have to know what have been the reasons, what has been the driving force, and how you have carried forward learning from one role to another. You cannot say, I worked in a software company for 3 years, and then last 1 year I've been working in a marketing company, and talk to me about the last 1 year and forget what I did for the last 3 years, or the 3 years or 4 years before that. So there has to be some coherence that you have to be able to draw, and that has to be in the form of skills or industry exposure, or your functional expertise that you developed. Okay, of course, it's very, very important to have very specific examples, because it is very normal for the interviewers to go deeper. I mean, if you thought of 2 levels, they'll go 4 levels deeper and ask you what you did, why you did, what were the challenges, how did you do it, etc., etc. And if you have not genuinely, authentically done it, then you may feel stuck, you may get stuck. So it's important to really, even if you have done it, it's important to assess, sit back and understand what are the key examples or key achievements that you want to highlight.
One thing which I can think of is the reflection part. I mean, what I could sense, and I think that is something which really helped me, because the kind of work that we have done that is there in the past. Now, if you are able to reflect well and think through it, I think that is something which would definitely help in the profile-based questions. Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, one is about specifically your achievements, but then you also have to ask yourself, you also have to think, how do I differentiate myself from a larger pool of applicants, not just from your industry, but even from your own organization? I mean, you'd be surprised. At a time, we have had 10 candidates working with us who were TCS employees, or it's very normal. I mean, these days, a lot of candidates who are in analytics, for example, with a ZS Associates or Mu Sigma or McKinsey Knowledge Center. So all of these analytics roles, they eventually graduate to an MBA and a consulting aspiration. But the idea is there is so much overlap in the quality of applications or applicants that during the interview, this is your opportunity to impress the interviewer to the extent that they start believing that, oh, you're from a overrepresented pool, all right, or you are from a pool where they have multiple candidates, but then you are certainly different, or you've done things beyond what you were supposed to do compared to most of the candidates who just come here and present what they have done. So very important to ask yourself that if I were to differentiate myself from my colleague who is in a similar role, how do I do that to the interviewer? And then again, think of the skills, think of, be prepared and go there ready with specific skills that you are able to, or that you want to present. But that is about the profile based questions. And then there is a career goal specific questions, which are very, very important, because I've not seen any interview or too many interviews where the career goals were not discussed. And then again, the career goal doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay to be exploring. It's okay to have researched and arrived at a certain career goal. But it's important to be able to relate them with your past experience. Like I said, you cannot say, forget what I've done, this is what I want to do, and take me because I have a very fancy or very interesting aspiration. So no one is selected or rejected because of a career goal, because you can want to work with the World Bank even if it doesn't recruit from ISB. But as long as you are able to justify what is your path to World Bank given an X or Y or Z background. Okay, so you should be able to correlate with your background. You should be able to extrapolate to the future and say, this is my plan, this is what I want to do. It's completely all right. They will, once you're there, they will help you achieve it, or they will help you achieve whatever is the closest, because there is a good support system once you start, or once you pursue the program at ISB. So that is about the career goal based questions. And then of course there can be related questions like, what's your plan A, what's your plan B, etc., etc. But a very important component of the interview. And then why MBA, why ISB? These are kind of questions that that again are not make or break often, but it's good to be able to establish why you need an MBA, why ISB will be able to help you achieve your goals, instead of talking about a number of things that ISB has, like the best faculty, the best exchange program with a Kellogg or whatever, or the best infrastructure. But all that is fine. But when a question like why MBA or why ISB is asked, you are supposed to be able to present how a certain program or how a certain school will be able to help you achieve your goals, transition from point A to point B, and what are the components at the school which you think will help you in that. And then, of course, there are the guesstimates or the cases, and guesstimates are not, or cases are not what we typically hear about. The case studies asked in consulting interviews, they're not supposed to be solved over 30 minutes. It's a 30-40 minute interview max. So you cannot afford to spend more than 5 to 7 minutes or 10 minutes tops on a guesstimate or case. And then they are they're very simple. We had a candidate who had worked in with a digital agency, and he was asked, if you were to create a digital campaign for ISB, how would you do that? And they're looking at your approach. They're looking at, if you have done that somewhere, how would you do that elsewhere? What is the approach that you've developed? So they may give you such scenarios, and how do you respond to that? Or they may give you guesstimates where it's more about your approach and analytical abilities. So these are the kind of questions, and how you can address them, handle them, prepare for them. But yeah, Harshit, happy to hear if you have any other advice to prepare for the interview and how to do that.
I mean, one thing which is very important is the clarity of thought, and that is what ISB is looking at. And again, it's a very fast-paced course. Once you're there on campus, things move really fast. There are 8 terms within 12 months. So it's a fast-paced course, and having that clarity of mind, having that clarity of thought is something which is extremely important. Last point with respect to the case studies and the guesstimates, while nobody wants an exact answer, what people are evaluating is the approach. Because nobody wants to know the exact answer, but if the approach which has been taken is right, then that gives a lot of confidence. So yeah.
Right, makes sense. And then it's important to know that the interview is not a make or break more often than not. So unless you do really poorly on your interview, even if the interviewer doesn't score you or rate you very high, it's a holistic process. So the interview scores will go back, and the team sits on the drawing board, understands your strengths and weaknesses in the context of the larger application, including your test score, essays, profile, diversity, and your interview score. So it's very normal for someone who may not have done extremely well on the interview and still get an admit. And it's also not surprising if someone thinks that they did really well, but they didn't get an admit, primarily because it just didn't add up. I mean, with all the material that you submitted, you probably needed to be a 5 on 5 on the interview, and you were not. So you were given a chance, but with a 620 GMAT, with a not so high experience, because there was some spike, and that spike didn't appear during the interview. So these are reasons sometimes that you see these exceptions.
Just to add one thing here, while the education background is not something which is you cannot make many changes there. And that is where the application and personal interview becomes extremely important, because these are the things which you can actually change, where you can score well and compensate for anything not so good in the profile. And this is something which is, again, it doesn't require too much effort. If somebody is able to prepare well, you can definitely score and compensate for some of the other parameters where probably you feel that the application is not that strong. Yeah.
Right. And talking about preparation, Harshit, so of course, ISB gives you only 5 to 7 days, like we discussed. So how much can one prepare? How important are mock interviews, or to what depth can one go in preparation? If you could throw some light, how did you approach it yourself?
Sure. I think one thing which is very important to understand, that ISB will give you only, let's say, 5 days on an average, 3 to 7 days. So the preparation for interview should not start once you've got the invite, because at times what happens is that if you got the invite on a Monday and your interview is scheduled for Saturday, there are a lot of other logistic things which you have to take care, and it can become a problem. So what I'd suggest, and something that I followed, once you have submitted the application, you can start slowly and steadily preparing for the interview. While the full throttle you can go once you've got the invite, but yeah, it's important to keep a track of your preparation once you submit the application. Now, with respect to the how to prepare, I think one thing which is very important is be extremely thorough with your application. As we discussed in the beginning, ISB already likes you, and that is the reason why you are sitting on the interview seat. So they already like you. They just want to validate and they just want to see the authenticity of what is mentioned. So it's extremely important to be extremely thorough with the application, whatever you have mentioned, not only the essays, but also the things which are there in the hobbies, in the extracurricular activities. So that is one thing which is important. While as a candidate, I don't know what is mentioned in the letter of recommendation, but if I have sat with my recommender, I know what are the things that that person can say. So in fact, in my interview, there were a couple of questions which were asked from my LOR, where recommender had said something, and that was asked in the interview. So yeah, that is again something which is important to know. Another thing which is critical is how well you're able to prepare for different kind of questions. There are four broad parameters that we discuss right now, and there are different interviewing techniques which are there. There are different models which are there which can be utilized for depending on the type of question which is there. There are different techniques, and again that just brings a structure, and the thought process comes across stronger. So that is one thing. Another thing which Prashant, I feel is very important is mocks. I mean, again, the whole purpose of a mock is to prepare you for different kind of situations. And if you are able to give at least 3 to 5 mocks, that will definitely prepare you. The answers will start flowing better, and I think that is something which definitely helps. One thing when I was entering into ISB interview that helped me, and something that I've shared with a lot of other candidates in the past, is to have an analogy with the GMAT exam, GMAT or GRE, and that is where for the exam also you take a lot of mocks, right? And the whole idea is that when you're actually giving the GMAT, you are fully prepared, and so that is where mocks help. Second thing is, I think you have to be ready for unforeseen situation, irrespective of how much you are prepared for your GMAT or GRE. On the exam day, there will be certain questions which you are not prepared for. So how flexible you are, how well you are able to handle those situations is something again very important. And yeah, so give mocks and have that level of flexibility, and again correlated with your GMAT prep. That is something which should definitely help.
Right, and I agree. I mean, even Sachin needs net practice before every match. So it's very important that you take those mocks, you prepare yourself, get into the group, and when you're sitting for the real interview, you have covered a wide range of questions. You know how you're going to react or what different people are going to ask you. But having said that, having prepared for the interview, no matter how much, a real interview is a real interview. So how does one approach the real interview? How is it different? I mean, for one, yes, it's real. It's not the mocks that you've done. But tell us what happens when when you go to the interview location, which is typically a hotel, if you're not in Hyderabad or Mohali, and then how does the entire process run through, and then what are the things that applicants or candidates should be aware of or careful about?
Right. So first thing, like anything, you have to be on time. There are certain certain things which are under your control to reach on time. So that is something which should be taken care. Second, it's very important to stay calm and confident. While there would be certain nervousness which would be there because this is a big thing, it's very important to stay calm and composed. That really helps. Prashant, one more thing which I want to add here is that by default, by design, ISB interviews are not stress interviews. When I was preparing, there was a lot of content, there was a lot of discussion on different forums that somebody had a stress interview. I can tell you and I can assure you, ISB interviews by design and default are not stress interviews. And there's a simple reason for that, that ISB wants to select you. A candidate would show the best performance when that person is calm and relaxed. Now, if somehow the interview is stressed, is quite stressful, then the candidate will not be able to show the best performance. So I think this is something which really helps, knowing that the people who are sitting on the other side of the table will do everything which is possible to make things simple for you. In fact, when I was going for an interview, initial 2-3 minutes, there was nothing about ISB, there was nothing about what are my aspirations, because there was a certain level of ice break which the team does. And the whole idea is that the person should be calm and composed. So that is again something which should be taken care. And again, I mean, being authentic, talk from your heart, be true to yourself, because the people who are sitting on the other side of the table One, they have gone through that process. Second, they have been alums, so they have been interviewing a lot of candidates. So, and that is the reason why ISB values the alum so much. So the people who are sitting on the other side, they have taken multiple interviews. So it's very important to be true and being authentic. Another thing which is very important, and I think that really helps in any candidate, there are certain spikes which are there in our profile. Maybe 3, maybe 4. There are different things which we are really proud of. Maybe in terms of our education qualification, maybe in terms of the work that we have done, maybe there's some social service that we have done. It's very important to direct the interview in that direction. So any question which is being asked, and if you know that there's a spike factor which is there, it's very important to mention it so that the interview can probe further into it and you can show the good work which you have done. In most of the interviews, there will be first question is tell me something about yourself, and that is a great opportunity to show the great work or something exemplary which you have done in your career. So yeah, these are some of the things which, if taken care, you are able to show the best that you want, because there could be a situation where, let's say there's a spike, but the interviewer never asked something related to that and that thing got missed. As I said in the beginning, ISB already likes you. They want to select you. They will do everything that is possible to bring you on campus. It's just that you have to show your best side during the interview. Yeah.
Right. And you rightly said, there is a lot of stress on the day, but that's something that the interviewers understand. So which means that if you couldn't answer one of the questions, two of the questions as well as you would have liked to, it's completely all right. You can recover by answering the subsequent set of questions well, because there is good opportunities. It's an extended period of 30 to 40 minutes. So that should help with doing well, even if you couldn't do your best on one of the questions. But then we do see how important it is to know what you are going to present, to be able to present that. Sometimes, like you said, the spikes in your application, one, you have to present it, but before that you know it. And all the preparation that you do will help you introspect and discover those areas of spikes. So that's primarily about the interview and the preparation. And on that note, I would also like to announce that EGMAT, if you're an EGMAT student, EGMAT and ISBmantra have a collaboration where if you want our help with application or interview prep, so there is a special pricing on ISBmantra products that EGMAT allows you to avail. So you can always write to support@egmat.com and you can ask for whatever ISBmantra service you seek. Good. So that is largely what we plan to discuss. And I see that there are some very interesting questions in the chat. So I'm happy to bring them up. Okay. So Priyanshi says, what if we've done social work but don't have any certificate for the same? Can we talk about them in the interview, why we started, etc.? What do you think, Harshit?
Yeah. So again, first thing, good question. First thing, ISB will never look at any of the certificates. By default, I've never heard anyone ISB asking for certificates. What they're looking for is the kind of work which has been done, right? So again, and when you are mentioning those things in the application, there's a very high possibility that in the interview it will be asked. So don't be worried, don't be concerned about that you don't have a certificate. If you really feel that some impactful and strong work has been done, please go ahead and mention it. And during the interview, that is a good time when you can talk about what kind of work and how you made an impact. Because if you notice at the application stage, there's no platform to submit the certificates. And the second thing is during different stages, I will never ask for a certificate. But yeah, being thorough with your work, being authentic, being true is something which is important. Yeah.
Right. And we talked about specific skills that one has to demonstrate. So if you see that your collaboration, your contribution to a non-profit allowed you to demonstrate those skills, why not? Bring it up in the interview, make it a part of one of your stories, not at the cost of a work story, because at the end of the day, your professional strength has to come out properly. But then even if you don't have a certificate, it's completely fine. If it is important to you and if it is important for the interviewers, they will talk about it. Okay, so there is a related question about hobbies. What are the questions asked related to the hobbies? Does it have an impact? And can we leave the hobbies section blank in the application? No, not at all. But what are the questions asked related to hobbies, Harshit?
Yeah, so Prashant, you've answered the first question. It's not a good idea to leave that section blank altogether, because as we discussed, ISB is looking at a holistic profile. So these are some things which are very important. Now, second thing, I don't think anybody would not have any kind of hobby. People who are applying are of certain age, right? People who have worked, so there's a certain level of experience. And again, anything can be a hobby, right? Something where you spend time, something which you're good at. So it should not be left blank, and do some kind of reflection, and you will have certain things which can be incorporated into the application. Now, what are the questions which are asked? To be honest, there are a lot of other things which are with respect to the overall profile, the kind of work which has been done, and what are the career goals. So hobbies is not something which is asked very frequently. But if somebody has mentioned something out loud on the application, then they can definitely ask that what kind of how it has impacted. So let's say if I say that I play sports very regularly, so what are the things which I've learned from sports? How am I able to take out time? How that activity has helped me? So, yeah, very generic questions. If let's say somebody has won an award, then more about why you were awarded, who were the other candidates in that team. So again, very basic questions, but again, this is something which happens towards the end of the application, until and unless somebody has explicitly mentioned that this is something an important part of the profile.
Right, and like you said, it's a holistic process. So no reason, and you don't want to leave that opportunity to add that extra perspective about your profiles. So it's not a good idea at all to leave the hobby section blank. And like Harshit said, if you introspect, if you think well, you will find something that you're passionate about, and that is it's the passion that they are looking at. Because when the interviewers talk to you about your hobby, it doesn't have to be a very fancy hobby. I mean, candidates sometimes try and write some very fancy hobbies, and it can be something like skydiving, which obviously you don't skydive every time you're free. So talk about things that you passionately like to do when you have time, which you like to talk about during the interview. This is your opportunity to show that extra dimension to your profile. And even if it is as simple as reading, prepare for questions like, what was the last book you read? What did you like about it? So it's more about understanding that, getting that perspective on who you are and what drives you beyond work.
So yeah, nobody will ever be judged on what is being mentioned as the hobby, but yeah, the kind of work which has been done on that. Yeah.
Right. And of course, we have a question on, does having a civil engineering background play a role in differentiating oneself? And I can say, someone may be thinking, does having instrumentation engineering background play a role, or does it differentiate you? The idea is, whatever profile you talk about, most of them are well represented at ISB. So like we discussed in one part of our session today, ask yourself, how do you differentiate yourself from others in your industry? Second, how do you differentiate yourself from others in your company? And if you are able to do that, if you get good answers to that, then there is no reason to believe that you will not be selected, because you have been able to express, or you've been able to present good differentiators to your profile. So this applies to candidates from all backgrounds, but there's certainly something different that someone with very high experience needs to do to get in, because ISB doesn't seem to have accepted a lot of candidates with 10 plus years experience over the years. So candidates who get in really need to be extremely unique. And when I say unique, sometimes it is the diversity of the profile, because candidates like those from medicine or armed forces background, they have high experience. They tend to come out of their profession after a few years only. It can be 10, 15, 20. But if you have a regular corporate profile, then Chandra, to answer your question, how does someone with high experience, 18 plus year experience, get in successfully? The only way is strong demonstrated leadership. Okay, for someone with 4 or 5 years of experience, they can have leadership potential, but someone with 18 years of experience, the potential is not enough. I mean, you've got enough time to demonstrate that. So it's very, very important to be able to show that you have got you've been able to address the leadership component of your profile right through your application, through the interview, very, very well. And then because the number of seats for high work ex candidates is so low, that you should hope that everything works in your favor. Okay. Okay. Harshit, you received an interview call. What information was provided to you when you received it, and how did you use that information?
Yeah. So, couple of things. One, the location of the interview will be provided, where it is happening, and second thing is the date and time. Nothing about who is there on the panel will be communicated, and in a way that helps because you are not going with any kind of biases in the interview. So, two things: one, the location, and second is date and time.
Okay. And of course, I mean, you interviewed or you went to ISB pre-COVID, and during COVID, the interviews have happened online. So what do you think? How does it look this year now that travel has opened, people are going out, meeting each
Yeah.
other?
So again, interviews. It's a good opportunity to meet the candidate face to face. Interview is a good opportunity for the ISB and the admission panel. So in most likely this time around it will be face to face, while a final confirmation hasn't come till now. But in all probability, the interviews will be happening face to face this time around.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine doing an in-person, face-to-face interview does give the interview panel good opportunity to understand the candidate better, to interact better, and it is very likely that ISB may open in-person interviews again this year, and it will be interesting. I mean, it can be logistically challenging both for the candidate and the school, but it's an important process both for ISB and for the applicant or the candidate. So I think it better be done in the best possible manner, and that gives you more opportunity to impress.
Yeah.
So good. What kind of documents do they see deeply? Like, of course, this is not exactly related to the interview, but I will add on to this or ask you this, Harshit, that do you really have to carry any documents to the interview? One, what Chandra is asking is if what other kind of documents one have to submit with the application, but then let's take it also to the interview and say that these are the documents you should carry to the interview, or probably you don't need to carry anything.
Again, that's a subjective choice. I mean, that a candidate can decide. For example, when I went for the interview, I didn't carry any documents, no certificates, nothing I carried because I thought it's okay to have a one-on-one conversation. They already have my application where everything has been mentioned in detail. So carrying documents is not mandatory. That is one. But yeah, if somebody wants to carry, there's some certificate which is there, something which you're really proud of. You're more than the panel would be more than happy to go through it. That was another point. Next thing. They do a background check. ISB will do a background check once a candidate has been selected, because it is not possible to do it for everyone. But yeah, the people who are selected, people who are shortlisted, who the admission has been offered, they will do a background check just to ensure that the information which has been communicated is right. In fact, my manager also got a call from the admissions team. But again, that is something which they are concerned, and they do it only after the admission is done and just before you are about to join the course.
Okay. Round two versus round one. Now, we discussed this in our previous session, but because we are so close to round one, I would happy to answer that try and apply in round one. You certainly have a much larger set of seats to fight for versus when you apply later and you have lower number of seats that are open to you. Also, if you are a candidate with a certain profile and ISB has already selected or given admits to a good number of candidates from that profile, then in the next round, they'll be more selective. But having said that, of course, a strong application is the first priority. And if you see that you can't produce a very strong application in round one, or you think that waiting for a while will add another 30-40 points to your GMAT, why not? Okay. Priyanshi has another question. What do you think, Harshit?
And again, if you are planning to give GMAT, you can definitely communicate to ISB, and they will be considerate enough to consider the new GMAT score. So if there's a situation where you are planning to apply in round one, but you feel that GMAT can be taken later on, the best thing is to reach out to the admissions team. They're extremely cooperative. They're extremely responsive. So if there's any doubt like this, definitely can reach out. And again, as we have said it multiple times, the whole objective is to select a candidate. So all the things which ISB will do is just to ensure that a candidate is able to enter is selected. And again, the whole team is extremely cooperative, and they are considerate enough. So if there's any extreme situation, or if there's anything which can strengthen the candidature, you can definitely mention it in email and take a confirmation from the team.
Right. And of course, there are times when you plan to take the GMAT right after submitting your application. Now, on one hand, it becomes a subjective decision where ISB may allow, may not allow. It's important to get that in writing over email. But certainly, if they have already given out the decisions, if they've already reviewed their application, if they've already either invited people from that bunch of applications and taken a decision that you're not going to be invited, then producing a new GMAT may not help, because that process is already over. But if you are able to produce that GMAT before interview invites have started rolling out, there are chances, I wouldn't speak on behalf of ISB, but then there are chances that they may appreciate the fact that you want to submit a higher GMAT. So write to them, get that in writing. And Ram, of course, Ram is asking if he can still avail ISBmantra services. Yes, why not? We have time to the deadline, so we are happy to help you. Chandra wants to know how long is the interview, and do they do the background check with anyone or the reference?
Prashant, sorry, I missed you. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chandra wants to know how long, what is the duration of the interview, and what is the background check done on? Is it based on the numbers that you provide in your application, or they just call up people randomly?
Right. So interviews primarily for 25 to 30 minutes. It can extend up to 35 minutes. So that is the range, 25 to 35. And normally the interviews will last for half an hour. So that is one. In terms of reference check, that is not something which is done at the interview stage. It is only once the offer is rolled out that they will just cross check to verify whether the information which was provided in the application is right or not. And I'm sure everybody would be putting the right information. So that should not be a concern.
Right. Great. I think this was a great session, and we were able to touch upon a wide range of topics. And thank you so much, Harshit. You were able to share your experience. We learned a lot from it, and of course, the interview is such a subjective thing that it depends a lot on the interviewer. So we can think about it, we can prepare for it, but the real day is the most important. So you will have to prepare well, and then remain alert for the D-Day. So thanks again.